The subject of Aisha's age at marriage to the Prophet Muhammad is one of the most documented and most debated historical topics in early Islamic history. While modern commentary often seeks to contextualize or explain the cultural norms of 7th century Arabia, a purely factual analysis requires a close look at the earliest sources in Islamic tradition and how these sources were recorded, preserved, and interpreted over time. The primary source for Aisha's age comes from hadith literature, specifically Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, two of the 6 canonical Sunni hadith collections. Multiple hadiths attributed to Aisha herself state that she was 6 years old when the marriage contract was drawn and 9 years old when the marriage was consummated. For example, Sahih al-Bukhari, Volume 7, Book 62, Hadith 64, states, narrated Aisha, "The Prophet married me when I was 6 years old and consummated the marriage with me when I was 9 years old." This same narration appears in several other locations within Bukhari and Muslim, with consistent wording. These collections are considered by Sunni Muslims to be among the most reliable sources of hadith after the Quran. Other early Islamic historians, including Ibn Ishaq, through the recension of Ibn Hisham, Ibn Sa'd, and al-Tabari, also make references to Aisha's age, either directly or indirectly. Al-Tabari in particular mentions that Abu Bakr, Aisha's father, initially objected to the marriage proposal due to Aisha's youth, although this is later overridden by what is described as a divine sanction. In another place, al-Tabari even seems to contradict himself, stating that all of Abu Bakr's children were born before the advent of Islam, which would imply that Aisha was older than 9 when the marriage was consummated, depending on the chronology used. Some Islamic scholars and modern revisionists have attempted to reconcile these inconsistencies. A number of arguments cite discrepancies in Aisha's reported involvement in historical events, such as her role in the Battle of Badr and Uhud, or her recollections of the early revelations, arguing that these suggest she was older than 9. Others point to the broader societal context in which child marriages were not uncommon across many cultures in antiquity, including the Arabian Peninsula. Despite these counter-arguments, the dominant position in classical Sunni scholarship remains consistent with the hadith sources, that Aisha was betrothed at 6 and the marriage consummated at 9. This is not limited to Sunni texts. Many early Shia sources also make similar references, although with less emphasis. Shia Islam, however, places less reliance on hadiths from Aisha due to theological differences, particularly regarding her role in the Battle of the Camel and opposition to Ali ibn Abi Talib. As a result, while the factual basis for her age is generally accepted, Aisha is viewed much more critically in Shia historiography, and her narrations are not given the same level of authority. It's worth noting that there are no references in the Quran to Aisha's age or to this marriage. The Quran, while mentioning marriage and maturity, does not specify any minimum age for consummation beyond a general framework requiring mutual consent and physical maturity, as implied in verse 4:6. Criticism of the marriage appears primarily in post-Enlightenment discourse and modern scholarship, particularly in the context of Western values concerning age of consent, child protection, and women's rights. However, strictly within the framework of classical Islamic historiography, the marriage is presented as normative, divinely sanctioned, and free from controversy. From a methodological standpoint, the uniformity and frequency of the hadith reports and their inclusion in the most rigorously authenticated collections make the traditional account difficult to dismiss from a historical standpoint. The question becomes not whether the reports exist, but how they are interpreted or contextualized in contemporary discourse. In sum, the earliest Islamic sources, hadith collections, biographies, seerah, and historical chronicles overwhelmingly support the narrative that Aisha was 6 at marriage and 9 at consummation. While modern reinterpretations exist, they tend to rely on speculative chronology, reinterpretation of hadith chains, or sociological considerations rather than direct textual contradiction. The historical record, taken on its own terms and without modern ethical frameworks imposed on it, strongly supports the early age claim as a near consensus position in classical Islamic tradition.